Great. Good morning. This is Deep Dive Lync Server 21.0 2013, Management Using PowerShell and More, SERV 204. I hope you're in the right session. Otherwise, you have the opportunity to adjourn to the right room. My name is Desmond Lee. I'm a Principal Solution Consultant for myself, based out of somewhere where we will go through a very interesting game, hopefully to help everybody get motivated and ramp up, because you must hear from my voice. It doesn't sound right. I party too much. I don't even know what time I ended up in bed and woke up like, what? The sun is out. So it's kind of tough. And I think you guys understand the feeling, and I really, really appreciate the fact that you are here. Don't you agree? So would you like to give yourself a big handful for just doing that? That warms things out, right? Cool. So what I'm going to do is the following. We will play a little game to start things up, and that kind of helps me to understand, and you, where I'm coming from. Coming from as in something else, but we'll come right to that. Okay. Good. You see anything? It's not because you're sleeping or dreaming as white floating things in the cloud. Cloud should be blue, right? So let's start. Yummy. A bit too much for the morning, but then again, it should motivate people. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Perhaps not so popular or well-known name of the watch, but we'll come right to that. Not even this, I think, is something that outside of the United States, people may or may not be familiar, but that's where a lot of cash and gold bars are being stashed. All right? No, we haven't come to that yet. That would be my next dream vacation location. How about that? To start off is like fresh air, nice mountains, great snow, and stuff like that. Another tick-tock. Maybe a myth, but it's commonly known that you should go by there somewhere to buy one of these. Otherwise, you wouldn't be considered to be there. Okay? Does it make it easier now? Who's this person there? We will come right to that. Even this guy, okay. He won recently the Australian Open tennis. So we have a rising star beyond Mr. R something. And this is our newest star, right? He goes by the name of, I can't even pronounce it, but iPod. I'm sorry, we are at a Microsoft event, but everybody knows Lync is open. We embrace Apple. We love iOS. We would like to have Android. You heard from the keynote speech that the Lync app for Android is going to be next, yeah? So we are open. So where are we? Or where do you think these pictures actually is trying to tell us? Or tell me, or you? Hey, you guys are awake. Well done. Very good. So that is where I will quickly flip back to the introduction slide. The whole point is to help one another wake up and to understand the fact I am indeed based out of Switzerland, even though I don't think I look like someone that could be from Switzerland. Isn't it? So, as I mentioned earlier, Principal Solution Architect, I work for myself. I have been running as a volunteer on server TechNet and MSDN news groups and forums as moderator, primarily Lync. PowerShell, you will see me quite often, and that's why you guys are here. I founded the Swiss IT Pro User Group, and I still am operating it, home base of Zurich, Switzerland. All right, I'm not Canadian. They like to wave their flags and tag it all over, but I thought that would help to visualize where we come from and the nice little mountains behind it. That's my blog. I want to do also a quick introduction to the partnership that I have with Headsize. This is a company that does cloud-based training, if you were to have any such of requirements, is fully set up in a very short period of time, and you can have access to it. So imagine, for those of you who may have tried to do training or even attempt hands-on lab, for example, there's quite a lot of effort that is required to set it up, configure, and so on and so forth to make it work the way you would expect it to. And cloud-based solution like Size or Azure and the rest will give you the opportunity to focus on what you should be doing rather than spending time setting up and so on. So pay them a visit and let them know that I sent you there. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do the live demo today. Right? That's all I would say for no more marketing stuff. Good. So the agenda, in order to make sure that we set the right expectations, is going to cover topics from core infrastructure management, a little bit about scripts from operational perspective, how we're going to do troubleshooting and monitoring, reporting and cross-charging. I have a very nice demo, which is not just demo. You could potentially use as a template to build further the kind of cross-charging that we are expecting to see, especially when management demands, hey, what did engineering chalk up, or the contact center, the kind of calls, whether it's going to be regional, local, or international, if they are permitted to do so. And finally, we will talk a bit more about script logging and time stamping, giving you a baseline to start off with. Is this agenda going to be more or less what you expect from such a presentation? Yeah, is that good? So I would really encourage interactivity, otherwise I will fall asleep. Hello? Otherwise, I will fall asleep. It looks like I fell asleep. Oh, dear. In any case, let's do a quick survey. Who has been using or who have been using PowerShell for like ages? For example, more than 6 months. Okay, about 2/3 of you. More than a year? Oh, okay. Maybe I should start off more than 5 years. So more or less, you guys feel comfortable with PowerShell? Not really. Yes, no. But I saw more than 5 years, somewhere over that corner. The dazzling lights kind of blinded me. But we are in Las Vegas, right? I love the spotlight. In any case, very important because you will see a lot of code sample. I'll try to run it live. Otherwise, you can take it off and work it from there. How about that? Okay? So that will be what we will be really jumping into, and that is why it is important to understand now that after the agenda, we have already done a bit of exercise. We're going to start off slow, just like cha-cha and so on, before we go to the ringgit, malenge, and disco and so on. A bit of exercises to warm things up, which we already did. First off, core infrastructure management. What are we talking about here? We want to know what we have in our Lync infrastructure. So straight off with PowerShell, there are several very useful commandlets available at your disposal. But one common mistake, or maybe is a habit, I presume a lot of you have worked with Exchange before, isn't it? Exchange 2007 and so on, where PowerShell was very and continued to be tightly integrated, and Lync has done a great job as well. They have one called Get Exchange Server, correct? But you can forget about it because there's no such thing as Get CS Computer or OCS or Lync. Therefore, the way to go about with it is to remember that PowerShell, as we all know, verb and noun. So it's always verb dash CS something, something, something. So in this case, for lack of the Get CS Server commandlet, you will be able to do Get CS Computer. The challenge using this particular commandlet is that CS Computer is so generic, and that's exactly the point. It can give you information regarding the different kind of pools from front-end, mediation server, and gateway, etc., etc. A couple of examples that I've done a screenshot. It's quite straightforward, so I don't think a warranty or it warrants a demonstration. We would rather spend more time on the more interesting thing. Yeah? So very quickly, Get CS Computer, you can hit it against a pool. You can specify an identity if you know exactly the name of the pool. Or you can run through a filter by putting in the wildcards as you're used to, question marks and stamps like star. Yeah? So that's to warm things up, how you should be using CS Computer to find out a bit more information about the various pools based on the names or filter. As we move along, pool is a central part of Lync. Yes, different pools once again. Therefore, logically speaking, you would expect something along the lines. Get-cs pool, you can hit it with an identity. If you know the name or names of the site, simply use the parameter site. Or filter is also mighty that sometimes people forget about it. Why I say that? If you tend to use commandlets with parameters that, let's say, require to process data coming all the way to the pipeline, not just that it is slower, it will overload your network for nothing. The client-server paradigm should be respected, if you will. So that means try to do the filtering where it should be filtered and get the results back rather than query for something and then pipe it to where You guys are familiar with that, yeah? So that's not optimal. Not that it doesn't work, but not optimal. Okay? And there you go. In this case, what I did here for the last line, where you see get pool, CS pool identity, the name of the pool, pipe through select object, I use a parameter that some people may not be aware of, but I would like to stress the point here now, is that a lot of these parameters may have fields which contain more than one value. What does it mean? When you see the output, it will be marked with the curly brackets, isn't it? So you have to use select minus expand property, mark down the name of the parameter, in this case, computers, and you can see the screenshot, which for the privacy, since you know I come from Switzerland, data protection and privacy is very important. This is not a canned demo. It's from one of the large projects worldwide I've done, where we are able to illustrate the point that indeed, that's how you should be using it. Okay? So far, so good? Yeah? This is the warm-up phase, so expect more. But I won't spend too much time on that unless you have questions, which you are welcome to post at any time. But you either have to shout, you don't have the luxury of the microphone unless you move to one. Exactly. Otherwise, shout, I will repeat the question because this is a recording session. I hope it'll be useful for now and later on. Good. The next thing you should be considering is services. As we all know, services play a critical part in Lync server, and there is a corresponding commandlet for that called CS, get CS service. You can run it against an instance of a role or service. If you see a little footnote that I made, pay attention to these things all over the place because they will illustrate to you certain pitfalls and optimization tips and tricks that you should consider. What I would like to mention here is that this particular commandlet doesn't accept multiple parameters. So for example, if you want to find out about a pool that runs the registrar service, you can only use registrar and you cannot combine it with web server. That's what I mean. And the challenge down there is that if you're talking about a large organization with a huge Lync deployment, or even if a small one, it doesn't make sense to try to copy and paste and try to make use of the parameters in itself and then later mix and match, so to speak. Why I'm saying that? That is why I have this nice little snippet for you. On the left-hand side is the classic way you probably will start off by thinking and say, okay, I know these and these and these are the services. The classic ones will be the pool, for example, the registry, the filter, and so on. But how would you know what are the differences between 2010 and 2013? Unless you spend a bit more time trying to find out. So read the help file, right? RTFM, yeah? In this case, you can see that I spent quite some time to do that. And the ones highlighted in yellow are specific to Lync 2013. How did I find out? I read the manual. But it's tedious. What happens when we have a new version and updates? I can't keep doing that. That's why I enlisted the help of PowerShell on the right-hand side. You can see that rather having to hard code everything, I simply call the help file, make sure that I target what I want, in this case, the different services, minus registry, minus web server, whatever, and then PowerShell will automatically list out the machines that have those roles. And that is where the next, well, not quite the next screenshot, but we will have something similar coming very soon. Make sense for you? All right, that's why I'm saying we are warming up. Right? You have to get the basics because it's fundamental that we get a good feeling about it. Then you can build upon it for the future. Yeah? We are future-proof. That's very important. Good. Moving on. One of the other very useful, commandlet is the CS topology, get CS topology. In a sense, the topology builder in itself is very, very helpful and useful. Click, click, click. But sometimes you just want a quick answer out of a list, full list of front-end servers and pools and so on. And you should be consulting get CS topology to help you go forward. Some of the stuff that I find interesting, which I hope you will too, but before we go right into it, notice right on top, I use a construct that may not be too familiar unless you have already used and get very feeling at home with PowerShell 3 and above. It's what we call auto expansion. The one on top, get, I said Bindestrich, that's German, oh dear, dash. Get dash CS topology, everything bracket up with dot sites means auto expansion. Rather than having to pass it to select minus expand property I talked about earlier, this is done for you automatically. It saves you one huge effort for doing so. And yeah, it only works in PowerShell 3 and above. If you want to do the same thing in PowerShell 2, which is anyway not a default supported platform in Lync 2013 anyway, you will have to do the classic loop where and so on and so on, or select expand property. Now, what I want to call out here in particular is that if you have organizations where you have multiple pools, or even a pool in itself for 2013, you can support up to how many machines in one 2013 front-end pool? Anybody knows? 12, exactly. So you're not going to, again, one by one go through it and find out which are the members of pool A, pool B, pool C, etc., isn't it? And worst case as in when you consult topology builder, it doesn't show you funny things like 1:1, 1:10, and then next to it 1:10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know what I'm saying? How many, for example, you have a 5-server front-end pool. And when you run the majority of Lync 2013 commandlets, it will reflect things like that rather than telling you the name of the server in the pool. Anyone encountered this before? Not really? Maybe later on when the demonstration that ties all this together will make it clearer. What I'm trying to say is that it's not easy to really run certain commandlets and see the name of the pool, or rather the name of the machine in the pool, just because it is written as 1:10-3, and you want to find out what is the FQDN, which I think I have a pointer for that. The FQDN of the machine, the cluster it belongs to. So for example, a cluster A that has 5 machines in the pool, you will have 10-1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you know this is the group of server, and you have the FQDN. You follow? So that's what I mean. This is where it will be helpful for you to pick up the information. Let me also pick up the pace, because I got 670 slides. Gotcha. Good. Next, CS topology. This is where you can further utilize the fact that cluster ID can be tied to the SQL instances. So many times, if you were to use Microsoft Management Studio, you may not remember the name of the instance and the server. And that's how you can use the illustrated commandlets with the relevant parameters to just pinpoint them. Yeah? This can come in very helpful If you do not have access to topology builder, or you want a quick and dirty, really quick and dirty method to find out which cluster, server instances are associated with the respective pools. Yeah? So this is getting a bit deeper already. Any questions so far? It's good? Okay. Let's move on. Lync databases. As in topology, we understand that SQL in an enterprise Lync setup plays a critical role. And that is where you would want to find out about, for example, the user database, where it is stored, associated front-end pool, or when you have the name, you do a quick check on the mirror state. Mirroring is supported and recommended, and if you are not aware, even SQL clustering is supported for new installation in 2013, right? Very beginning it wasn't, but later on it was with the service cumulative update. Good, so that's where you can make use of some of these, well, commandlets for Lync to do right, just that. Now, let's jump into another very common problem and issue, certificates. How many of you do not have problems with expiring certificate until you know about it, things stop working? Do not have problems. Oh, okay, do not, all right? So the rest of you have problems. All right, so it's like, certificate expired, nobody can connect anymore, it doesn't work, etc., etc. Certificates is another important component. That's why I believe this would be helpful to put something in place as a scheduled job, for example, to run automatically and notify you in advance. So let's start off step by step. Notice we have, at the beginning, the name of a pool, and I'm going to use a very interesting feature called ordered hash table. Quick survey. Who doesn't know what is an hash table? Who doesn't know or never use? Okay. In a nutshell, hash table is like a lookup dictionary, but it's all jump up for optimization purposes. You have a key and you have a value. So for example, I say, I'm going to look for Japan in order to find out the capital city of Japan, which is Tokyo, right? If I want to look for the USA, the capital city is Seattle. Of course not, yeah? But it's not done in order. It's good for optimization's sake, but in PowerShell 3 and above, we have a new feature. With this tag here, ordered, it does what it does. Whatever you put into the hash table will be laid out in order, and you can play some tricks with it. That's where I'm trying to illustrate down here with certificates. Look at it. I start off by having a for each loop and try to do a remote command. Invoke command is remote PowerShell in action, and target against the list of server in the pool by running a script block that gets information about the certificate with some parameters that I'm after, primarily the SAN names, the expiry date, and so on, thumbprint, and then I assign it to an ordered hash table. I built it as we go along, right? So once that is done, I just run a count how many of them have been retrieved. Most importantly, line 19. Even though English is pretty much international as far as the IT world is concerned, we need to be careful and pay attention when we deal with organizations that not necessarily. There you go. My hangover start kicking. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, for example, by default, if you work with CSV, comma separator variables, the name tells you already, comma separator variables, correct? That's standard US system or English for the matter, but not in Switzerland. The common separator is a semicolon. And that is why I use this, not a trick, but to make sure that it works as expected. Whether it's going to be US system, Spanish, Chinese, or whatever, as a delimiter. Okay, that's one tip that I would like you to consider using. It's just one line there. And subsequently, having gotten the data, I run through it and build up using an array, simple array, line 22. Yeah, and look up for the values and then just pull up what I want and have it established as individual lines. The result is the following. Right? I can even pipe it and save to a file, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, import it, and in this particular instance, I use outgrid to present the information I found. And as you can see, the bunch of servers, there's some repetition down there. Okay, and down here, we're talking about here. Yeah, you will find that there's a group of certificates that fall in line with this bunch of servers in that pool, and second one and third one. I didn't make it look fancy, but the core code is there. Would you think this could be useful for you? Yeah, so bring it back and make use of it. So don't worry, if you like to have the code, I will see if I can do something about it, so it will save you all the typing. This is tried and tested, it works, okay? Good, let's move on. She's good, huh? We have gone through the warm-up phase. We need to do a bit more stretching in order to be able to digest things. It's like, yeah, I hope I survive, before I fall asleep. Good, next phase. We're going to talk about monitoring and troubleshooting, a very interesting yet relevant topic as far as operation is concerned. And there you go again. We have some other commandlets that you can consider using in PowerShell, not least the one called getCS Windows service. It targets specific services that are only Lync. That is to say, if you want to find out about the spooler service, the server service, and so on, which is part and parcel of the core Windows in itself, it doesn't work. Or rather, it works, but it doesn't give you the result, because that's not what it is designed for. Yeah. Important thing is that if you're talking, once again, about localization or internationalization, the display name property is localized. Why? This is another point in time I like to point out, to you, is that I had this challenge in the past whereby it was assumed that the names of the services, display name in particular, is the same in English as well as in German. Yeah? Why? Again, simply because despite the fact that German in the IT world utilizes quite a bit of terms, more or less similar to English, but there are exceptions. Or in French, we call it faux amis. Yeah, what you see is not what you get. Therefore, you may want to pay attention by running through your system in order to avoid wasting time hunting around and troubleshoot something that doesn't exist in the first place. Yeah, so pay attention to that and you should be good. So what happened here now, you can see that I have, once again, some information to start us off, having a pool defined, get the computers in pool, and then do an initialization for an array. And then I will run the get Windows service in itself. Separately, I have another statement. Notice your regular get service is being deployed. Why? As we all understand, have a quick show of hand. Who hasn't worked with Lync 2013 yet? One or two, right? So that's where Windows Fabric is one of the key core components. Actually, it's not part of Lync. It is Windows, but it's something that Lync 2010 requires, and it will be installed as part of the installation. Pay attention that you should be using the classic get service commandlet in order to find out the status of this one service down there. So let's move on quickly. Bunch of objects added and so on, and the end result is as illustrated here. You will not be fast enough to copy or even take a screenshot or photo, but if you want, let me know, I'll pause for you. Essentially, as you can see down here, you have objects listed running under a Lync 2010 environment. This is specific to Lync 2010. Lync 2013, you have the fabric. That's why you have a status. You don't have that for 2010. And you have another new service down there plus that one down there. So let me help you on this side. That's what I mean. I have the arrows down there. Lync 2010 and Lync 2013. So you may want to consider them because they play critical role to the health and functionality of your environment Lync 2013. Therefore, the script in itself, I try to make it generic so that you cover all grounds, at least up to 2013 now. Yeah, make sense? Okay? So, speed up. Next thing that we should be looking at besides services, the status is naturally event log. I won't say I'm shocked, but I am surprised at times where people forget that there's a lot of helpful gems in the event log that help you identify problems way before it manifests in itself. So if you don't have a proper system like SCOM to help you monitor the environment, not least because of Lync, but Exchange and everything else out there, then this as a baseline could help you. What happened is that you start off, in this case, classically by using the get event log. I think almost everybody knows that. Remind ourselves the fact that earlier we said that the fact of the matter is that we try to run filter at the server side and only bring down the set of reports that we want. Yeah? But here, there's no option to specify the event ID that you're checking against. So you're kind of forced to pipe into the where commandlet in order to process and get whatever you want. So I would like to introduce to you, if you have not already considered using it, get win event, where you can define a hash table, there you go, my favorite friend, and specify the log names, the level as indicated here, the event ID, should there be problem, pass it a common parameter error handling. This is all going to take place on the server, and you get the result immediately. That's what I meant, okay? What you should do then is, after having that information gathered for you, I use this construct and simply, once again, build up my hash table. It's a very useful tool. If you don't feel very comfortable with it, you should start considering it, and then look up for the keys and match them to the servers, line 29 to 30, and then export it to a file, XML file in this case. Further, if you were to require processing of the file, simply import it again, loop through it because it is deserialized once it is saved, and that is the kind of output you would expect. For example, I have these kind of problems with application module, backup service 800 plus, etc., etc. Everything built within the hash table. Obviously, once you are comfortable working with hash table, you can work through them and see the result as such here. I use some of the very interesting, well, extended functionality, if you will, to customize the output I want through a select statement on line 70 to 71, okay? And the result is as follows here. How many modules, especially related to the Lync application, backup, etc., were affected, the names and the IDs, and I think I do have more to come. And there you go. I would like to find out for server number 11, what are the top 3 from line 108 to 11 on that side of the audience. Let me come here, trying to strike a balance. I'm not like John Wayne. I would love to do this, but I'll try anyway. So there you go. Hopefully this is useful, yeah, because it's there. You just need to customize it and make a bit of tweaks here, and then you are ready to go. Okay, let's move on. Any questions at this juncture? If not, okay, good. We are good on time. Performance counter, very important. The issue is that, especially when we talk about new setup, baseline should be something you should not forget, because it helps you to record the key information like memory usage, CPU load, etc., and justify for the next purchase. What I'm trying to do here is to illustrate to you the fact that we have built-in commandlet that goes by the name of get minus counter. That's not a Lync specific commandlet that enables you to call out information related to monitoring Lync. This is a snapshot for Lync 2010. Let's quickly look at Lync 2013. almost the same. What's the difference? You notice this green shaded area on the left screenshot? So Microsoft has adjusted the naming convention. Once again, if you were to query the respective performance counters, you must take this into consideration. And that's the command you would consider using, line 1, 2, 3. More performance counter, more script. Yeah, if you like things like that, it's green, it's not red, so that means it works. Basically, you have line 1 to line 8 to set up the background, if you will. You then see a list of related counters that you can play against to monitor whether it's something that's related to the data MCU or the mediation server, whatnot you have down there. In this particular case, I am interested only in the SIP aspect of the performance counter, so I did a quick, isolation, if you will, by having a very interesting trick. Why this is done, just want to highlight here. As you can see down here, line 49 and 50, SIP is what I'm looking at, but it is the second last parameter. It's not the very last one. So there's nothing built in to say I want that one. That's why I consulted PowerShell and used this little trick here on line, where's that? Line 54. I select the last two. Out of this last two, I select the first one. That works too. Line 52. And I group them together, and that's the result of the kind of performance counter I can count on, no pun intended, for Lync related to SIP. And then you can go ahead and process them. From line 70 to 82 onwards is where you could simply deploy the fully qualified name, if you will, of the counter in question, and you have the information that you're looking for right away at your fingertips. A little bit more information. In this particular case, I'm keen to find out what kind of information is available related to the mediation server. And there you go. The top 3 down here illustrated the fact that I have, at this point in time, snapshot, no connections. But this is a hidden gem. You don't necessarily need to know all the ins and outs of SQL queries, joins and here and there, and you have the information. Not many people know about it. That's why I would like to highlight this, with more to come. So rather than having to type in all this, copy and paste and so on, there are MVPs like myself and colleagues that are Lync enthusiasts that have prepared the commonly used performance counters in an XML file. You simply need to import them, customize it, and say, run it under certain schedule, which makes use of the Windows data collection set. You guys know about that? Yeah? And automatically you have the logs generated for your convenience. And that's how you could source this out. After having the XML file ready, simply run the command called logman with the relevant parameters. If you need help, just /?, and all the glory details of how to run this command line too is all there. So we're not going to spend time on that. Okay? Good. Sanity check. Are you guys still with me? Yeah? That is like sleeping or yes? Yeah. Because some cultures, yes, is, yeah, I can't even do that. I will break my neck. Yeah, good. Right, so we're going to get into something quite heavy. Yeah, heavy as in waking up and so on. Along the lines of what I've already pointed out, front-end pool activity load is one of the common things that you may be expected to report back on. So how? As I mentioned, one of them, pretty common information, if you will, even though it may not be complete, bits and pieces there, here and there, where it may not work, even though the screenshots and all that show. Precisely that you need to understand enough about SQL. By the way, you can't run away from it in a couple of instances, but in Lync 2013, life is so much easier. Performance counter, I pointed out to you, but here, another tool that you may want to consider looking at is called get CS Windows Service. We have already seen this commandlet, but what is it doing here as far as load is concerned? Very simple. Load is concerned is the following. I have a code right there once again. In the classic sense, you will use get service, provide the name, wildcard, and you have that down there. But that doesn't cut it because there may be services, naming convention and so on, that departs from what we would expect from a PowerShell commandlet. Then you have 19 to 23, which makes use of the get CS Windows service. Notice something interesting, for example, line 38, right at the end, or even 36, active conferences 11, connected users 21. How about that? You don't need to be an SQL guru to find out how many users at this point in time is connected to my server number 10. You have it live like that on your fingertips. Isn't it great? Don't you think so? All right? And you don't need to, I'm going to join this, write this and that. And very quickly, this particular commandlet provides you the information. So I tried to package it in a way that would make it useful for you. This very interesting loop, once again, makes use of my favorite friend, or rather, with the kind assistance of my favorite friend, hash table. I built out a list of related information, and here I have, for each server, listed against the kind of services with the number of connections beside it. So right at the bottom for line 81 and below, if I know the name of the service, I'm able to find, in this pool with 5 servers, I didn't print it out, but in the sequence as listed, server number 1 in this pool has 11 active conferences currently taking place, second one with 12, etc., etc. So don't you think this would be useful for you for capacity planning? You don't need anything really fancy and pay and reach out for your deep pockets. If you have one, go ahead. But PowerShell is there at your disposal. Right, more good, fun stuff. When we process the information that has been captured, as you can see, that is where I now make it even clearer by developing the base code that I started off with, and now able to tell you for each of the service, I have server, because it's a hash table, right? This hash table contains more than one hash table within a hash table, or an array, if you will. That's why if you look at line 191, you have server number 10, the number of park calls, the number of conferences, etc. And following that, right at the end, FE11 is server number 2, number 3, etc., etc. So there you go. You see the power hash table available at your disposal. And there you go as well, something that you can cross-check. If you want to know about the data MCU, in this case, for the first server, you have that number of active conferences, and that is the server. So no more additional work required to tie them together. You can make it look nice, of course, but that's not the point. Good. How's things going so far? Yeah, great, thank you. Thank you for the feedback. Important is that we cover the bases, and we'll see something really exciting. I have to really go to like Gear 6 or so. Right, here's where something gets interesting. Frequently asked question. I would like to find out what kind of clients get connected to my infrastructure. Is it the RTM client? Is it the one with CU2, CU3, CU4, or even Lync 15 or Lync app, the modern Lync app, etc.? Yeah? So in this case, you see the logo. This is something that we are talking about in Lync 2013, and you can make use of views. Views are things that make the complicated SQL simple for you. Let us quickly walk through the steps required. And this is a framework that you can always use and modify accordingly. You start off by defining a string towards the database that you're interested in. You will then open up a connection for line 3 and 4 and 5, assign the relevant string to it, define the query that you want, in this instance, the versions of the clients connecting to the server. Next, you're going to open up SQL command line 8 and following, before you start off by having another component that goes by the name of SQL data adapter, etc. And towards the end, you bring everything together and present the information that you want. This framework can always be recycled for some other purposes. In this case, the dependency is where? Line 7. It's just a regular SQL, and it's nothing fancy, but you can build very fancy and interesting constructs out of it. So there you go. How much simpler can it get, right? There are very complicated ones, but this is how you could go about with it and come up with the result you want in a jiffy. Moving on, you could have considered, in the case of Lync 2010, evident from the logo, This is a bit more complicated stuff with all the joins from table to table as required in order to come up with a plan. So here is just a sample live data that I pull out from the database where we have different CU levels of Lync 2010 client as well as the 2013 client that was hitting the machine or machines in the pool. There is a very up-to-date source of information from Microsoft, one of the TechNet bloggers that maintain quite actual up-to-date information about the versions and so on. You may want to check it up to help you build a case for yourself. Having said that, this particular query can be extended as pointed out by the arrow down there to limit your scope to a particular user, say maybe because he has problem connecting, but you first want to find out which version of the client he has, rather than calling click, 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 which sometimes take even longer. So there you go for this illustration here. Good, moving on, metrics. In Lync, we know that we have to deal with things like IM, video conference, and so on and so forth. And the nice thing about it in 2013 is that you also have a view. Essentially, a view is like a window into your SQL database, right? You consolidate, you zoom into a particular area that you are interested in without having to worry about the nitty-gritty details of how it is done in the background. So just by running this from line 1 to 4, you have the information available for you. For people who have done quite a bit about database design, optimization, and normalization, you will know what I mean. Rather than having to store the name IM, application sharing, etc., you would use numerics to represent them. So that's what you get out of this particular view. If you move on and make it a bit more complicated by working with 2 separate tables and group them according. No, not really, but here is where you see what I'm trying to say. With the different media types available in the organization, you are able to count how many IMs are currently live, how many, well, number 8 is application sharing is taking place, and last but not least here, how many audio conferences is happening. Very quickly you can get that. Moving on, sometimes, as I illustrated right at the beginning, yeah, you may not know, oh, number 1 is for IM, number 8 is for application sharing, and number 18 is audio. That is why, with the help of this first part, we are able to bring things together. As you can see, line 28 to 33, this is what I have already used previously to verify the fact that it gives me what I want. So by joining this table together, Microsoft join is essentially inner join, simple join, right? Where it's like typically a customer has 1 or more orders. Make sense? If you like the company, you will buy more things, right? So 1 customer, more orders. So you think of this way, this is a simple way of putting these 2 different tables together. And now, instead of having to worry about what is media type 1, I tell you straight away media type 1 is IM. Media type 16 is audio, which is something we have to concern quite a bit. Yeah? There you go. All right. Like it so far? Is it too deep, too light? It's not what I want? Is it okay? Cool? Yeah? It expired. What? Oh, well, thank you very much. Cool. Let's move on. I'm excited. I've got more stuff to share. Media types. Look familiar? Oh, yes, please. These are in the back end, but you can always point it towards the local database. In Lync 2013, you have a very, well, I won't say stress, but the database that is used in order to guard against certain problems of having to depend too much on SQL, yeah, the live data, so to speak. So you can simply, we have this anyway. Line 1, as you can see, I'm targeting against this server, and it is a database, LCS database. But much of this information is also locally available on the RTC database. Much, not all. You have to customize accordingly. But by and large, as you can see, this template, the baseline itself, remains the same. What do you need to change? Nothing but a query. The illustration earlier, yeah, just replace line 7 with the code that we have tested separately, and you're ready to go. Verified using the Management Studio in itself. Yes, sir. Very good question. The question was, how do you find out the different views available? And I have a screenshot and live illustration for that as well. Yeah, good. Quickly. There you go. It's worth spending the time doing it. So more things to look at. Matrix call type. Once again, beyond the one we talked about, you even have unknown down here. That's how you can query it. And you can expand it further by having the inner join, as illustrated earlier. This is just a screenshot. And the gentleman's question, go to Management Studio. This is for Lync 2010. And this is for Lync 2013. Look at that. It is under the database LCS, and you have the extra views down there, which hides all the complexity of the SQL queries. Just use them as you would any other SQL statements against the table. Okay, is that good for you, sir? All right, good. Moving on. Diagnostics, very important question of the day. Diagnostics, we need to understand what kind of diagnostic views are available. Of course, Snooper and the rest. Yes, sir. Okay. Yes, I will try to make use of the opportunity later when I switch over to the demo environment and call the code. Is that okay? Yeah. Yeah, we will do that, okay? Oh, yes, it's all there. It's not hidden. It's just, think of it like store procedures. They are there for you to use. Good. So what I'm trying to do here for core diagnostic is the following. You have quite a number of IDs that you need to follow. How many of them are affected and so on. What I'm trying to do is the following. Building upon the basic code in itself, there's no line number for me to refer to, so I have to start pointing the laser. I try to isolate the information or optimize the information based on dates, because that helps you to track the history and the trend, isn't it? But you may not necessarily be interested in the exact time. You just want to know the trend throughout the day and each day. That is where, after calling this out on the database in itself, I go ahead and throw off the time. I just want the date. And subsequently, if you can see, I'm able to pull the different components of the SQL query together and give me an idea for this particular day, what happened to this ID and how many instances, in fact, were triggered. Yeah? Clearly, that is not so fun. Let's look at some PowerShell code then. First part, I define the query, which you have seen. And now, here's another method to use. Rather than using the template earlier, you could call and count on the SQL snap-in. Sounds legacy, but it's a snap-in rather than a module. Essentially, they do the same thing. I add the snap-in. I run this on the SQL in itself because by installation, default, it is there. I will then invoke SQL command. Notice, this is pretty much PowerShell, one-liner, rather than having a bunch of code that you've seen twice or thrice in a row. Hit it against the server and the machine and the query that you have specified on line 23, and you're good to go. That is the output. Oops, let me go back quickly. And you can see you pretty much do away with a lot of setup with adapters and fueling and so on. Run the command, invoke -SQL command, and you have exactly the kind of information I talked about towards the end of the code base down here. We don't like to see too many code, but at the end of the day, once you've gotten everything together, another of my favorite commandlet is group object, and this is the outcome. So I can plot the trend of what we expect to see on this day, how many instances for that particular event ID, which will help you focus your effort on troubleshooting and support. You think this will be useful for you? Yeah? As a template, once again, but it's live. It's really something that I hope you can find useful. Good. For the pretty last part of this section, this is similar to what I wanted to talk about, where we deal with some of the diagnostic metadata. I can find out exactly the cause of the ID and the purpose of the ID. In this case, my diagnostic ID, 51004, has got to do with the client information, and action was initiated by user, essentially you can ignore this. So this is part of operation, but as an illustration. And that's how you build up the code base. All right. Enough stretching. Now we have to go for the hard stuff. You guys ready for it? I don't have a lot of time, but I'll try to do what I can. Yeah? Good. That's why it's like exercise, team part. Reporting and core cross-charging. What does that mean? Any idea? You guys haven't been too interactive, so now's your turn. Come on, free for all. Shout it out loud. What do you understand by reporting and core cross-charging? Reporting, everybody knows. Okay, what is core cross-charging? Yes, but what can you get out of it? Why do you want to do core cross-charging? Is that something you can natively get out of Lync without having some, how would I say, fancy code or tools and expensive investments? Okay, let me give you a hint. I work in the engineering department, for example. Obviously, most of my calls go through Lync. In fact, almost all. Unless it's private, I'll use my mobile phone or I'm on the road. I could be calling a premium number. I can be calling an 0800 number. I may be calling an internal extension, or it's a local or regional number, national number. But how am I going to find out who called what when and how much does it cost per minute, right? Mobile call costs more than a local call or a national call or international call for that matter. Comparable is premium calls, 0900 numbers. Those special services that you find in Las Vegas, for example. No? And it's like, okay, thank you very much. You know what I mean? So we need to have a means to have an overview to see what we have or not. So that IT, even though most of the time continue to be a call center, we should be able to charge back in order to justify expansion, for example, and investment. Make sense? That's why this is where we talk a bit more as to how you could use PowerShell to help you with core cross-charging. I'm shocked. What is that? That is SQL query. the gist behind it, but we're not going to spend time doing it. However, this is what you can potentially use to identify the different numbers that we have identified, and talk about in order to move towards getting what you want. But first, something very important. You should consider using Management Studio or even PowerShell in itself to define a database. In this case, the database is called Lync Building, and create a view that populates the information you want related to enterprise voice, which is telephony in general. So what happened here is the code behind it. There are some dependencies I would like to illustrate. For all intents, I think I fell asleep. I knocked against the microphone. You guys still with me? Yeah, good. So the colored section essentially is your LDAP domain, like DN equals to www, for example. Not DN, DC equals to www, DC equals Lee Desmond, DC equals .net, whatever, LDAP. And then it's hitting against the database that I've also set up, but actually not database, I'm sorry, ADSI, which queries the LDAP, essentially, your domain controller in the background. And I'm using the power of SQL in itself to get me the information, rather than the classical PowerShell commands from Lync to find out who's enterprise voice or not. Information is all there. So this is the view that I built. It is used as a basis. And what you require for it is the ADSI connector. You have a Lync server defined, as you can see, the marked area under the category of server objects in SQL Management Studio. That's where some of the parameters you should fill in the blanks to make it easy, because it is a one-time setting. After that, you can forget about it, as long as the credentials and all that are valid. So how does it work? With this behind you and having defined a very complex looking query, we start off once again with something pretty familiar, isn't it? I chose, in this case, the snap in option. Having defined the SQL statement, I then go ahead and run the invoke SQL query against the database instance that is going by the name of Lync billing. And subsequently, you can see for this instance, I have 127 objects returned. I can export it and do things like that. Blah, blah, blah. Very complex looking stuff, but this is the result. Okay, now that's not really interesting. I'm going to do demonstration now in order to make sure that at least this exciting part gets out of the door for you. Okay, you see the code well behind you? Otherwise, I'll zoom in a bit. I continue off where we started off from, line 141. I've already exported the information I require by running the SQL statement. And you can see I intend, after having imported the XML file, define the tariffs associated with the different kind of calls as I talk about. Mobile phone, we call it handy in EMEA, international calls, national calls, local calls, etc., premium, toll-free. Notice the fact that this is also a form of hash table, and if you have any special symbol or symbols like this, you should enclose them with codes. These are the rates I define just for the purpose of illustration. Set up some variables from line 154 onwards, and then start computing based on this rather complex looking mix of brackets and loops and so on and so forth. Details, if you like, we can discuss about it. And once we have that, the result shows by exposing the information that you have exported and saved. So what I'm going to do is this. In the interest of time, I've prepared this, but this is live. What I'm going to do is I highlight this portion right until the end and push up the result pane and run F8. This is the end result. Nothing fancy, but it illustrates the point of what I'm trying to get to. I have a department that goes by the name of Sun. Sun department, regardless of the number of people, have made exclusively international calls. And that is the amount that has costed. Saturn or Saturn, mobile handy calls, and that is the rate based on the tariff I have specified and computed, so on and so forth, until we reach Delta. This department, the Delta force, needs to be in touch with their loved ones while they're being deployed on the field. Hopefully one day we'll have Lync client for satellite, and then we'll have another entry for that. Okay? So, but you can see what I'm trying to say. For the department, Delta, they made quite a number of internal calls, and that's what they will be built. Mobile calls, local calls, premium calls, international, etc., etc. Do you like that? You think this is something that you could potentially use? Huh? So this code works out of it. The only main challenge I would say is the one right on top. Right on top meaning, yes, really right on top. The query that I mentioned earlier, where you define a couple of stuff that you need and really do some kind of switch statement in SQL in itself, finish off and send you the information. There's a lot of mappings and stuff like that. But most importantly are areas like this. For example, I use regular expression here. Country code for Switzerland is +41, and if it starts with 7, any digit 75, 76, 77, 78, 79 are mobile-related calls, toll-free, premium, and so on. It's up to you to customize this bunch of stuff and then move on from there. The rest of the code, by now, I hope, is relatively self-explanatory. Is that okay for you? Yeah? Okay, in the interest of time, I want to make sure that I leave some minutes for discussion. Otherwise, you can always try to catch me after the presentation. We will be grouping together the guys that do quite a bit of PowerShell, and especially at this particular conference, we will be at the booth 11:30 a.m. onwards until lunchtime. So come by and hit me. I don't literally mean hit me. Huh? I'm quite awake now, so don't do that. All right? I want to go back home live. Good. So we have seen something earlier, and where's the something? So this is where we last left off. The end result is clear. You could deploy it almost instantaneously without having to go through a lot of discussions to invest in heavy power tools, which you maybe use a fraction of the functionality. Right, it's time to relax a bit. We have stressed ourselves quite a bit. I hope your head has not yet exploded like mine days ago, but anyway, we should try to relax anyway. Nice picture down there. Script logging and time stamping, which is the last part of the discussion here. Essentially, why is the question we should ask ourselves. Logging and time stamping, especially when we talk about compliance and governance, if you don't have SCORM, you don't have archiving and whatever, how can we go one step further? Think about it. Today, if I make a change to the Lync infrastructure, I require certain group membership, primarily CS administrator. Yeah? And once I've done it, someone comes along, my colleague, and reverse the change. Is there a means to track who did what and when? No, right? So I'm trying here as an example to illustrate the point that you could potentially put something in place to help you take care of change management from a technical perspective in order to understand where and who came from, and those are the justification, if you will. The unfortunate part of the story is that using PowerShell alone in itself, there are some constraints. Namely, applications write directly to the host. Whether it's going to be the interface, ISE, or the classic console that we are so used to loving, they don't give you any information. For example, write host. There's no parameter for you to say, please key it to a file, something to that effect. That is why it's a challenge down there, which brings me to the second point. There's no redirection unless you explicitly do it. The good thing is that we have also start transcript, but once again, you can't use it in the ISE. It is limited to per PowerShell session. No means to say when exactly command A, B, or C were executed at time 1, 2, or 3. Therefore, we should consider some of the options available for us. That is to say, we could potentially pack everything we want in the PS1 script, execute it, and redirect the output. Classic workaround, if you will. Alternatively, you can execute the script through remoting, but you may imagine if you work with remoting long enough, there are other challenges involved in itself. So why throw yourself into the water when you are having some challenges in getting the basic working? As you may have noticed, I built the code step by step. I don't like throw you into the water and let you swim. Yeah? Sometimes it's hard, but that's how you learn. Yeah? Experiment. So in this case, it is going to be a challenge in itself for remoting, so you may not want to do that. Continue to consider deploying start transcript, but then you will have to pass it yourself. There's no tool to help you do so. Maybe there are some volunteers from the MVPs and so on. Otherwise, Windows service or logging agent, which installs as a service, nobody can change it except the super user. That is one consideration. Or you have customized script package in a module, PowerShell. Last but not least, make sure that PowerShell profile takes care of all the users, not just the personal profile, but anybody else that could be running the script. So one quick example that I've prepared with some help from my kind colleague, Barry, is to write a function that goes by the name of log activity. The command that you can throw against this function, write to the file that you want. At line 8 to 12, we have a simple loop which builds out the array. And line 14 looks a bit interesting, where you build a script block from .NET Framework and compile everything right towards the end, where if you were to run any command, you will be able to pipe it and log it to the log file that you decide to establish. On the right-hand side, with lines 1 to 8, that's how you execute it. At the end of the day, the result will be as expected. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip this part of the demonstration, but it's rather straightforward. Make use of the function, that's it. Yeah? And you will have exactly who did what, when, the IP address, what time, and the commands that were executed, including, as you can see, the possibility of running the command with spaces, which explicitly in PowerShell you should mark them, or else line number 6, you can even run it without the codes. You can optimize and personalize it further. Now, having said that, in this aspect, there are community contributions which will make your life and my life even easier. 2 of them from the same colleague. His name is David White. He has done 2 which address the issue of script logging, timestamp, and compliance. Check them out. All right, the URLs, if not there, you can Bing them. Or the other one. All right, that brings us pretty much to the end of the presentation with around about 4 minutes to spare. I'd like to just point out to you some of the resources which you may want to consider looking at. Next Hop or Tech Center Lync, which provides you all the information you need, one in and around Lync. I hang around the Lync forum and news group quite often and a lot. I'm a moderator there as well. Support for Lync, check that out as well. Plus my good buddies, the MVP Alliance on the right-hand side. You're welcome to visit leedesmond.com, my website that I keep up to date on a very regular basis. And that pretty much concludes the session. Before I even bid you goodbye, and sure, I know it's going to be tough. If you don't have Lync client, go install it on your phone. And very important, you have the opportunity to continue to explore some aspects of Lync, PowerShell or otherwise. And please, 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 I don't know why they left out my picture. Now you see me live, so most importantly, fill out evaluations. Because if you like this presentation, please make sure you like. If you don't like it, please make sure you like. Right, with that, I think that's about it. Questions and answers. We have about 3 minutes or so. Tell me. If you don't have a question, I have a question. Does it meet your requirements? Has the expectations been fulfilled? Yes, no? Yes? Okay, so thank you very much. Any question? Last call. Or you know everything that I presented. You know exactly which table is linked to which one by which join and so on and so forth. Yes? Oh man, you guys are great. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. I hope to see you next year. Make sure evaluation form. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon ahead. Bye-bye.